we're going to keep it rolling, Kyle. And we're going to get right into the new look. And this is a very, very obvious statement. The new look TFC. As they get their season underway tonight against FC Dallas, lots of players are gone. This is not the TFC we are used to seeing because there's very few players still there from the TFC we're used to seeing.
Yeah, really.
I'm going to read off the list of players that are gone. Okay?
Yep.
Justin Morrow, retired. Zavaleta, didn't have his option exercised. Rocco Romeo, didn't have his option exercised. Kevin Silva, no exercise of the option. Patrick Mullins, no exercise of the option. Julian Dunn was signed by HamCam in Norway. Omar Gonzalez was signed as a free agent by the New England Revolution. Nick DeLeon, out of contract. Subasa Endo, out of contract. Liam Fraser, out of contract. And Erison Gallardo, out of contract. Richie Laredo was sold to Nottingham Forest. Huge congratulations to him. Dom Dwyer was traded to FC Dallas for $50,000 in general allocation money. Marky Delgado was traded for $400,000 in 2022 general allocation and a conditional $100,000 in 2023 general allocation money to the LA Galaxy. Jefferson Soteldo was transferred to Tigres. In Mexico, Josie Altidore was an off-season buyout, and Oro Jr. was loaned to Santos FC. What does that leave you with? 14 players from the roster last year have returned. Most of them are bench players or
young and up-and-coming players.
Partial starters.
And Pozuelo.
And Pozuelo and Bradley. And the goalie. Pozuelo, Bradley, and the goalie.
Yeah.
have all come back. Obviously, the big deal in the offseason was signing Lorenzo Insigne. He will not join the club until July, though, so we have to look at what they have right now. They brought in a bunch of guys. Shane O'Neill was signed as a free agent from Seattle. Luca Petrasso was promoted from TFC 2. He's going to be a very interesting young piece. DeAndre Kerr, he's a homegrown player. He was signed as well. Greg Ranjit Singh was signed from the keeper pool in the MLS. Lucas McNaughton and Caden Chung were both signed from Pacific FC in the CPL, which is a huge boon for the CPL. Shows how good that quality is in the league. The big defensive move, in my opinion, was transferring, I guess, Carlos Salcedo from Tigres as a designated player. Is a huge deal. He's an absolute stud, so that's a big one. Jesus Jimenez was signed from Poland, and Cozy Thompson was just promoted, I think, yesterday. From TFC 2. That's it. There's a lot longer of a list of players out than players in. They're a little light right now. How big is the additions of Insigne and Salcedo going to be, especially when, Insigne actually gets here?
Oh, I think once everybody gets here, I mean, there's potentially another rumor too in March of Cressida coming in. We'll see if that actually happens or not, but that could be a huge thing as well. And I think you're kind of looking at the original TFC when they brought in all those big name players and they had
Bradley
that big move. They had the. Well, and then you think of the Javinko time too, right? Where they brought in a big name player, and all of a sudden they were relevant again. They were a TFC was relevant again in the MLS. And I think you're kind of looking at a 2.0 version of this, where some of those big signings, they have some of the homegrown talent coming up. You see a lot of the TFC 2 guys that are getting signed, getting brought up. They have the young kids, and I think they have the potential to be good, but they needed that veteran influence that wasn't Josie Altidore. Sorry to say, Josie Altidore did great for us, but he couldn't stay healthy for the life of him. And the issue was we needed Josie Altidore because we didn't have the depth the last couple of years. So, bringing up some of this depth, getting that, and now adding in those star-studded pieces, I think truly TFC and probably next, I would say probably not necessarily this year. I would say next year or 2 years will be contending for the cup again, I think.
Yeah, and you mentioned just the young talent, right? They have 24 players currently signed to the roster. That doesn't include Insigne, by the way, because he's not technically there until July.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at the 24 players right now, 12 of them are under the age of 25.
Yeah.
So half of your roster is under the age of 25. And yeah, I don't know how many of them are necessarily going to be huge players in the season.
Mm-hmm.
But a guy like Io Akinola, when he's healthy, he's probably starting until July at least. And even then, he might find a way to find a spot still with Insigne. Lucas Singh, same thing, right? Or Luke Singh, right? He's still technically on the roster.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be a big part with Salcedo and Chris Mavinga as a center back.
Yep.
As well as Lucas McNaughton. They got no wingbacks right now, so they're playing Jaquil Marshall-Rudy and Jacob Schaffelberg as wingbacks. They're both under the age of 25. Like, these guys are going to play. Noble Okello is also going to play.
Mm-hmm.
Now the question is, how much do they play and how big of an impact are they going to have? But the youngsters on this team are good.
Well, and we haven't, like, the other thing I didn't mention was Pozuelo was the MVP 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. Last year didn't exactly have the greatest season because
realistically, terrible season though,
but didn't have a whole lot of help either. So I mean, he was kind of trying to do pretty much everything himself.
Right.
So so in that case, with some of these younger talent, some of these star-studded players coming in, does that help him develop his game again? Does he get back towards that MVP type season? And if that's the case, then we're potentially talking about TFC being like a powerhouse. If that's the case, because we're talking about Insigne, who I think will make a huge impact. I think.
Yeah.
You add Pozuelo and you have if you have the youngsters on the wings backs and they actually turn out to be good on those wing backs, all of a sudden you're like, okay, like we're good, we're set now.
Yeah.
So
it's going to be interesting for sure. And you bring up the wing backs and like for me, there's a concern that we don't have true wing backs on the roster right now. Yes, Caden Chung, Kamar Lawrence is listed as a left back, and Luca Petrasso are all wing backs, but those guys don't really jump off the page for me as top talents. Like Larea was a top MLS talent, right, as a wing back.
Yeah.
So they're playing these young guys in Schaffelberg and Marshall-Rudy as wing backs. And we don't know what it's going to look like. Who knows? Like a week from now, 2 weeks from now, after they've played a couple games, we could be coming back to this conversation, you and me, and saying, "Oh, well, they're fine. There's no real concern."
Yep.
Going into the season, for me at least, there's a decent level of concern there because that is in the MLS. They play a lot down the wing. There's not a whole lot that goes through the middle. Not many teams have the ability of Toronto FC to play down the middle.
Yeah.
Right? Like TFC does because our middle is Bradley, then Pozuelo, and then in July it'll be Insigne. For the last few years, it's been Altidore and Giovinco and right up front.
Yeah.
You can play through the middle when you got three guys like that.
100%.
How many teams have that?
Yep.
So not having true wingbacks, I'm concerned going into this season. I'm not going to say like I'm red alert, something's really needs to be done, but there is a level of concern going in, right?
I mean, there has to be. That's the biggest thing, right? Because the biggest thing is you don't know what you have until you've seen them actually play. And they're essentially brand new into the position. So I'm not expecting, all success to start with. That would be unrealistic, to be honest. I think there will be some falters where they're not necessarily in the right position or whatever it may be, where it's those growing pains that you could say that it's a new position, it's a new players. Like some of these guys haven't played with any of these guys either, because half the defenders or half the team is all brand new. They haven't had they don't have that chemistry that they normally would have. So I mean, I think there will be some growing pains this year for the team, but I think there's a chance that they truly do succeed. If Cressida does come in, then it kind of gives them a little bit more options too. He's rumored to be coming in March, but that's obviously not confirmed. So if he would give them that veteran presence back there on that back line too, which probably could ease everybody else's mind and maybe let those younger players play a little bit more freely, I guess. So that way they're not just, hey, we gotta sit back, we gotta defend properly, and No, maybe go on a couple runs, go up there, like truly, like play the position and do what brings your skill set out, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's some possibility of success, but we'll see how it actually develops.
I think the one thing that TFC can kind of bank on is that their center backs are very strong, especially for an MLS squad. Chris Mavinga has shown that he is a top quality center back in the MLS. Bringing in a guy like Salcedo is massive. When you
Mm-hmm.
have cover for young players, it allows them to play a little bit more relaxed. And we've seen it at many, many levels. This isn't rocket science here, folks. We've seen it in many sports, right? Think about the NHL. You have a
Mm-hmm.
top veteran defenseman playing with a young guy who's trying to prove himself. They usually play a lot more calm when they know that that guy's there, right? And then as opposed to when they're playing with another young defenseman, and they're both are like, oh, I got to cover this guy. Oh wait, no, I can't do this. I can't do that. It's not the case when you have that veteran there, and when you got a guy like Salcedo, who is one of the top defenders in the uh, Mexican League MX last year.
Mm-hmm.
That helps. That's a
100%.
huge, huge thing, and to have a guy like Michael Bradley there as well, like a true game commander in the middle of the park, who will now not have to play center back this year because we have center backs. That's another big
That was
thing.
nuts.
That's a huge thing. So they've done a good job of securing that center back role.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they want to go with two in Mavinga and Salcedo, or they want to throw a third in there and put Shane O'Neill as well, and do a 3-5 whatever.
Yeah.
They have that option. And that might be the way they go. They might end up going, especially when Insigne gets here, it could be a 3-5-2 sort of thing with
Yep.
Schaffelberg and Marshall Ruddy running up the wings, Pozuelo, Bradley, and I mean, in my opinion, you're probably throwing Okello or Priso in that defensive midfield role alongside Bradley, and then you're probably playing Akinola and Insigne up top because they're kind of a thunder and lightning kind of combo there.
Yep.
That's probably a really good lineup. Like, especially in the MLS, that gives you wing depth, that gives you control of the midfield, that has a lot of potential going forward with Pozuelo, Insigne, and Akinola. That's probably the ideal lineup when the season gets into play and when Insigne gets here and everything going.
Yep.
But it all starts with that back line, and if they have three and they play with Salcedo, Mavinga, and O'Neill, you're looking at a very strong back line.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, and
and
that's you also on the front line too. You have a Chara too, right? So if a
yeah,
Chara can develop at all as a true finisher, then you have that extra depth as well of the scoring too. So,
yeah.
um,
I was just trying to start with the who I think should be in the starting lineup. I think Achara
well, of course,
starts tonight.
I would assume so. I would probably say it's because Akinola isn't healthy, is he? I didn't. I think he's
He's
is he.
listed
I think
as
he's nursing
hurt,
an injury.
but they just don't know when he's coming back because he ruptured his cruciate last year.
Right.
So we just don't know when he's coming back. But he's been training, right? I think he's gotten
Yeah.
into a couple of the preseason games, but I'm not 100. Don't quote me on that. I
So
cannot
yeah,
cannot confirm.
I believe it. I believe Achara probably will start tonight.
Yeah.
So
Or Jimenez might start. I forgot about Jimenez. They brought him in too,
right. Yep. Yeah, they
right?
brought him in from Poland. Yep.
So there's another guy who could just easily go into that starting lineup depending on who you're playing. So
True.
there's so many options up front. But up front isn't the issue. It's the wingbacks right now that I
Yeah,
think
that's the biggest question mark.
are the issue.